In the opening scene, the chart for Questcoin reveals a sudden bearish trend over the past few days. This has caused widespread panic among cryptocurrency traders, many of whom have taken to community forums to share their concerns. Over time, a growing number of these traders are beginning to suspect that Questcoin might be a scam. Some traders have shared their suspicions in the community, suggesting that organization is manipulating cryptocurrency prices. In contrast, others argue that such an organization doesn't even exist. This has gradually sparked a debate within the community. In a city filled with towering skyscrapers, a wealthy man chuckles at the community's discussions. He is pleased by what the charts reveal. This man owns a company named One, known for manipulating cryptocurrency. The wealthy man disclosed that he intentionally chose an obscure yet appealing name for his investment to drive the charts upward. This strategy lured small traders, making them believe they were earning profits, only for him to subsequently siphon all their earning. The wealthy man, Jung Pilga, the chairman of One, is elated at how effortlessly he earned money from those small traders. He praises team leader Yu for flawlessly executing the operation. This reveals the team leader's full name as Yu Biome. Jung commends Yu Biome for his expertise in manipulating traders' mindsets. Eager to reward him, Jung offers to gift him the most expensive car. However, Yu Biome declines, requesting cash instead. Jung is taken aback by Yu Biome's response. Jung continues to praise Yu Biome for his fearlessness, even suggesting that Yu Biome possesses psychopathic tendencies, a trait that Jung finds intriguing. He agrees to reward Yu Biome with cash, but with the condition that Yu Biome ensures the job is done perfectly. As he speaks, Jung's gaze settles on an injured man bound by rope. At the dock, a staff member from the One organization kicked the injured man, demanding to know how he discovered the location of their office. The injured man divulged that someone named X had sent the office address to a group chat. The injured man pleaded for mercy, apologizing for his actions. He explained that he approached their office in anger after losing 300 million won. Desperately, he continued to beg, mentioning he has a daughter to care for and that he cannot die there. The staff appeared to empathize with him, but out of nowhere, a kick landed on the injured man's face, sending him flying. The kicker was revealed to be Yu Biome, who asserted that the injured man was lying about having a daughter. The staff apologized to Yu Biome for showing empathy towards the injured man. Yu Biome picked up a steel pipe, intent on completing his task flawlessly. He remarked that they wouldn't be able to make money if they felt pity for everyone, since every person in such situations has their own personal reasons. Yu Biome finished his task and checked his bank account, finding a deposit of 300 million won from Chairman Jung. Yet, he didn't appear content. He felt he was still far from reaching his true goal. Yu Biome thought it wouldn't be long before he took down all those responsible for putting him in this damn situation. He then slowly left the dock. Rewinding 5 years ago at Hankook University in Korea, regarded as the top university in the country, a lecturer posed an equation to the students. A student raised his hand and provided the correct answer. This student was a younger version of Yu Biome. The lecturer was impressed and asked if Yu Biome had used a calculator, but Yu Biome stated he'd solved it mentally. Many students in the class were envious, with some thinking Yu Biome was just trying to show off. However, one girl appeared genuinely interested in Yu Biome and admired his abilities. After school, the girl approached Yu Biome, inviting him to join her for a club meeting. Yu Biome politely declined, explaining he had a part-time job to attend because he had 2 payments to make that day. He suggested that she proceed without him. Other students mocked him for his obsession with money. In Yu Biome's mind, he believed those students lived comfortable lives thanks to their parents and had no right to judge his preoccupation with finances. Yu Biome didn't dwell on their comments and continued on his way. As he calculated his earnings from his part-time job, he realized it was sufficient to cover his living expenses and his sister's academy fee. He felt relieved and happy, knowing he had enough to treat himself to a good meal. However, upon returning home, Yu Biome discovered that the 20 million won he had earned was entirely spent by his father. Yu Biome was taken aback. That money was intended for his sister's academy fees. His father assured him that the funds would double, explaining he had invested it in a cryptocurrency named Extra Coin, which he believed would grow tenfold in just a week. Yo-Biom was furious that his father had used his earnings for cryptocurrency. However, his father clarified that it wasn't Yo-Biom's money. He had also used all of his own savings, his wife's retirement fund, and funds from a home loan, amounting to about $500 million, all invested into Extra Coin. Yo-Biom's father argued that they should thank him for investing in Extra Coin because it would soon grow to $5 billion. To the moon! Yo-Biom believed his father's claims were bullshit. He confronted him, arguing that his father had never truly contributed to the family and only brought trouble. Because of him, his sister might not be able to attend a music university. In anger, Yo-Biom's father slapped him, retorting that it was just 20 million won. Hearing the commotion, Yo-Biom's sister emerged from her room, asserting that she wouldn't pursue music university. Yo-Biom, concerned for her safety, warned her to return to her room. However, before she could, their father, in his anger, slapped her too. He railed against his children, claiming it was futile, raising them when they kept standing in his way, especially with his gambling. Determined to prove them wrong, he insisted that Extra Coin would be worth 5 billion won in just a week, vowing to take full responsibility if things went awry. A week later, their father chose to run away without taking any responsibility. It was reported that Extra Coin had been exposed as a scam and was subsequently delisted. Yo-Biom and his sister lost their home and found themselves buried in debt. In the end, their father took the easy way out. During the funeral ceremonies, a loan shark unexpectedly arrived, demanding repayment of a debt amounting to 3 million won within the next week. Yo-Biom discovered that his father had also borrowed money from this loan shark to invest in cryptocurrency. Yo-Biom's mother was hospitalized due to the shock, and the medical bills piled up, becoming another expense they couldn't handle. Yo-Biom's sister, profoundly affected by the traumatic events, suffered hearing problems and abandoned her dreams of attending music university. Yo-Biom too halted his university education, taking on various labor-intensive jobs and working as a waiter. He was frequently harassed and beaten by the loan sharks over unpaid debts. All of this devastation in Yo-Biom's family life was due to Extra Coin. One day, while working at a high-class pub in Gangnam, Yo-Biom served a bottle of Dom Perignon, an expensive champagne, to a customer. He couldn't help but wonder how someone could afford a bottle worth millions of won. As he walked away, he overheard the word Extra Coin from the same customer. It was revealed that the man behind Extra Coin was none other than the young Chairman Jung, who openly boasted about his earnings from Extra Coin amounting to 3 billion won. Chairman Jung continued, emphasizing that people should delve into cryptocurrency where there are no stringent regulations. Unlike the stock market. In this realm, the rich prosper while the vulnerable suffer. The powerful prey on the weak. Chairman Jung found it amusing that these small traders viewed the cryptocurrency world as one filled with opportunities, not realizing that many had been driven to desperation, even suicide, due to their machinations. Yo-Biom recognized Chairman Jung as the very man responsible for ruining his family. Gripping a bottle of whiskey, he felt an overwhelming urge to attack Chairman Jung, especially as he continued to mock the small traders. Consumed by emotion, Yo-Biom couldn't bear the sight of the man who brought his family to ruin, laughing and living luxuriously. Suddenly, Chairman Jung noticed Yo-Biom lingering in the room for too long and ordered him to leave. Torn between revenge and caution, Yo-Biom contemplated hitting him with the whiskey bottle, but chose instead to serve it to Chairman Jung. Yo-Biom quickly conjured an excuse, saying the whiskey was on the house in celebration of the pub's 3rd anniversary opening. He then asked Chairman Jung for his business card without a word. Chairman Jung carelessly tossed the card onto the floor. As Yo-Biom picked it up and exited, he realized that killing Chairman Jung in that moment wouldn't change the past. It wasn't the right time. With the card in hand, Yo-Biom embarked on his journey for revenge. Yo-Biom started to go all out into researching cryptocurrency. He also started to work the streets while gaining real fighting experience and amassing valuable information about his enemy. His whiteboard became a testament to his meticulous planning, detailing the ins and outs of the one organization plotting his path to vengeance. After 3 long years, his plan to annihilate one was fully fleshed out. Working under the thumb of the loan shark, Yo-Biome was frequently reminded of the debt his father left behind. The loan shark, mistaking Yo-Biome's familiarity for weakness, threatened to involve Yo-Biome's sister if payments weren't made promptly. In a fit of rage, Yo-Biome grabbed the loan shark by the throat, lifting him with ease. He warned him fiercely against even thinking of his sister. Having abandoned his former self, Yo-Biome had morphed into the very evil he once despised. Upon arriving at the One Company's headquarters, he noted that it stood as one of the top 3 powerhouses of cryptocurrency manipulation in Korea. The majority of its staff had roots in gangster life, and collectively, they had caused damages amounting to billions of won. As Yo-Biome observed the empire Chairman Jung had built over the past 3 years, he was determined to dismantle it. Now, at the age of 28, Yo-Biome infiltrated the One Company driven by a singular motive: revenge. 3 months later, in a strategic move to undermine the company's influence over cryptocurrency, Yo-Biome secured a position within the One Company. However, during these 3 months, Chairman Jung remained conspicuously absent, never once showing his face. Working undercover as a janitor, Yo-Biome overheard a conversation where a fat man advised a client against investing in Peltic's coin. This revealed that the fat man was Yo-Minggu, a member of the strategy team 2, in the One Company. Minggu directed Yo-Biome to clean more meticulously. However, Yo-Biome remained focused on his work without acknowledging him. Minggu grew frustrated. Enraged by what he perceived as a slight, Minggu attempted to throw a punch at Yo-Biome. Yo-Biome deftly tapped Minggu's leg, causing him to lose balance and tumble to the ground. Offering a seemingly sincere apology, Yo-Biome claimed it was an accident. Minggu, however, insisted it was intentional. Facing Yo-Biome's silent, intense gaze, a sense of fear overtook Minggu, prompting him to hastily leave the scene. Yo-Biome interjected, advising him to invest in Peltic coin right away because the timing was perfect. Minggu appeared perplexed. Yo-Biome delved into a detailed technical analysis of the Peltic coin chart, pointing out the impending break of the resistance line. Minggu struggled to grasp what Yo-Biome was saying. He dismissed Yo-Biome's advice, thinking, how could a mere janitor know anything about cryptocurrency? Just then, a woman interrupted, urgently calling Minggu to join an ongoing conference. The woman was revealed to be Kim Mi-young, the strategy team 2 leader. Minggu attempted to shift the blame onto Yo-Biome, claiming that his tardiness to the conference was due to their interrupted conversation. Kim was well aware of Yo-Biome's identity and his past as a student at one of Korea's top universities. Recognizing the potential value of his insights, she invited Yo-Biome to join the conference as well. The conference began with a discussion about crystal coin. Kim explained that small kimchi coin with a market cap of 30 billion and a daily trading volume of about 4 billion. The acquisition has come to an end, which means a force that buys and collects coin before price manipulation. Kim outlined a plan to engage in bicycle trading, which the act of inflating the trading volume by buying and selling by oneself. Listening intently, Yo-Biome realized their intent to manipulate the coin's price, reaping profits off the backs of unsuspecting small traders. In his mind, he drew a parallel, suspecting they had executed a similar scheme with extra coin. Kim proposed a plan to inflate the price of the coin. Minggu felt that an investment of 10 billion won would suffice and hoped it would yield double the returns. However, other members of Strategy Team 2 believed he was being naive. They contended that 15 billion won would be necessary, leading to a heated argument among them. Minggu pleaded with Kim, asking her to trust his judgment on pumping the price. But amidst their discussion, Yo-Biome confidently stepped in with a mere 500,000 won. His assertion left everyone in the room in shock. He believed that with this amount, the price could be boosted to triple its current value. Minggu, skeptical of Yo-Biome's claim, dismissed him as a novice who had little understanding of the intricate world of cryptocurrency. Yo-Biome countered, pointing out that small traders had evolved and become much more smarter. He emphasized that it wasn't about the volume of the investment, but rather the timing. Furthermore, he believed that a significant 90% of the coin's price movement was influenced by trader psychology. Mingu's persistent belittling of Yobiom was pushing him to the edge. With rising frustration, Yobiom's voice hardened, warning Mingu to release his grip as he met his eyes with a piercing gaze. Mingu, sensing the intensity in Yobiom's eyes, let go of his hold. Kim stepped in, offering an apology to Yobiom. She explained that the company wasn't in a position to entrust such an important operation to a newcomer. The main reason she had invited him to the meeting was to give him a glimpse into the company's workings. Suddenly, the conference room's TV flickered to life. From the speakers, a voice addressed Kim, urging her to trust Yobiom's judgment, highlighting Yobiom's outstanding IQ of 150 and his education from one of Korea's top economics universities. It became clear that the voice was Chairman Jung's. Chairman Jung approved Yobiom's plan, but gave him a one-week deadline. He warned that if Yobiom failed, he would become fish food and made it clear he wasn't joking. In the background of Chairman Jung's room, an aquarium revealed a man being consumed by fish, emphasizing the gravity of the threat. Yobiom considered Chairman Jung's threat. He believed that accepting the challenge would earn him the chairman's trust, which would position him better for his revenge later. Kim, sensing the danger, tried to convince Yobiom that the chairman was merely bluffing and urged him to decline the perilous task. Nonetheless, Yobiom accepted the challenge and promptly exited the conference room. As they left the building, Kim happened to be heading in the same direction and offered Yobiom a ride home. Gratefully, Yobiom entered the car. But before he could settle in, Kim swiftly pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at him. Kim was aware that Yobiom was hiding something. She chose to reveal to him that she had conducted a background check on him from the moment he joined the company. She questioned whether he might be a spy from a rival company, given his past involvement with cryptocurrency. Unbeknownst to Kim, Yobiom had anticipated such a situation arising during his preparations for revenge. In the past, Yobiom already gathered every information regarding to the Power Coin board. Yobiom studied it all. There are various types of forces on the coin board. Multi-leveled pyramid scheme power based on group chat rooms, the force of coin developers, investment banks, various institutions. Then, since a few years ago, gangsters and violent group alike were drawn to the smell of money, they slowly jumped into the world of coin, and within those forces the places that developed to be the biggest. Seoul 1, Bashan 3 Seadrak, based around Chinese Connections Red Door. Via these manipulations of the coin market, they earned great amounts of money through the back door, and using this backdoor money, they reinvested in other business to develop, and in an instant, the three major gangs had made their place in the world. Now, the era of gangsters based around coin funds were introduced, and so numerous gang-based coin forces continued to appear and disappear randomly across the country. And this was the part where Yobiom dug into, in order to tamper with his past power. Yobiom began to speak about X, a legendary genius in the world of cryptocurrency trading, the largest whale in the coin world, and an individual veiled in mystery with just 500,000 won. He was able to make several billions. He was a Korean that was always included in the foreign ranking, but no one knew his true identity. Yobiom fabricated a story, asserting that X had been responsible for pushing his family to the brink of complete financial ruin, ultimately exhausting all of his father's hospital funds. According to Yobiom's research, team leader Kim had a boyfriend whom she planned to marry. However, the boyfriend had put their 300 million won saving into funds and lost it all thanks to X. Team leader Kim may have forgiven that man, but that man eventually gave up his own life. And to team leader, with that sort of a past, she will definitely feel some sympathy for the words Yobiom just said. Kim holstered her gun and opted to provide Yobiom with a ride home, a clear sign that she had placed her trust in him and no longer considered him a potential spy. Yobiom felt a sense of accomplishment knowing that he had successfully earned Kim's trust. However, he was fully aware that 3 years prior, when his father had taken his own life, team leader Kim had also been a member of one. This revelation meant that Kim was also among Yobiom's intended targets for revenge. a few days after the deal, without even considering the time, in order to earn profit from small traders. Yahello had started his plans. Kim entered the storage room and was curious about what Yahello was doing there. She found him studying various monitoring charts, and this worried her. Kim thought Yahello might be taking it easy when they didn't have much time for the deal. Yahello, however, was fully engrossed in his task. He explained that he was analyzing charts, news, and blog posts from different coin communities. He was meticulously calculating the changing psychology of small traders, their fears, and when their desires peaked. Yahello believed that finding the perfect timing was crucial to executing their plan successfully. Yahello confident that he will be victorious since his calculations are never wrong. Yahello watched as the chart spiked upward on the planned day, marking the success of their operation. Team 2 members praised Yahello and celebrated their profits. Kim was taken aback by Yahello's competence and began to see him as a formidable force, feeling the need to be cautious around him. However, Yahello wasn't celebrating. He knew that their actions would cause other people to lose money, and for many, that money was precious. It could even lead some of them to consider suicide. Yahello was troubled by the ethical implications of their actions. As Team 2 members continued to celebrate, Yahello grew increasingly frustrated, thinking about the time when he was part of it. He found their joy disgusting. When Yahello decided to leave, Kim stopped him, surprised that he still seemed disappointed despite the successful operation. She suggested they go out for a drink, but Yahello politely declined, explaining that he had a parent meeting to attend. This revelation surprised Kim, as she didn't know Yahello had a child. He corrected her, revealing that it was his little sister. At the school, the homeroom teacher informed Yahello about his sister's situation, revealing that she had become the target of bullies. Yahello immediately requested the names of all the bullies. In the schoolyard, the bullies were discussing their losses in the crystal coin. One of the students had lost a significant amount of money. Yahello's little sister passed by. She coughed accidentally. The bullies misinterpreted it as laughter and slapped her, causing her to fall. One of the bullies even threatened her with a paper knife. In her moment of distress, Yahello called out Appa, signaling her brother's arrival. Yahello stepped forward with an intense gaze, ready to confront the bullies. Yahello wasted no time and swiftly knocked down the leader of the bullies. However, Yeonjun and Kim Byung-jeon teamed up against Yahello, thinking they could overpower him. But Yahello made it look easy. He punched Byung-jeon and kicked Junbei, sending both of them sprawling to the ground. Furious at his inability to defeat Yahello, the leader of the bullies decided to take things up a notch. He grabbed the paper knife and lunged at Yahello's back, attempting to stab him. Yahello's concerned for his sister, and she wondered why he was at the school. Yahello telling his sister that he had a parent-teacher meeting to attend. However, as he spoke, the bully leader struck from behind, rapidly stabbing Yahello. To the bully leader's astonishment, Yahello remained unfazed by the stab. The bully leader caught sight of a tattoo on Yahello's back. This sight terrified the bully leader, who began to suspect that Yahello might be associated with the Yakuza. Yahello, wearing a stern expression, questioned the bully leader about whether he had invested his money in crystal coin. The bully leader admitted that he had invested in crystal coin, and Yahello's anger flared up. In reality, his anger stemmed from the guilt he felt for the manipulation he had done to influence the coin's price, which had now indirectly affected his sister. He couldn't help but blame himself for the situation. Terrified by Yahello's intense gaze, the bullies immediately apologized to Yu-sung. Yahello then left, warning the bullies never to get involved in cryptocurrency investments again, hoping to spare them from becoming victims in the future. Back in the headquarters of one company, inside the chairman's room, Chairman Jung was taken aback by Kim's suggestion that Yahello should join Operation Team 2. Kim believed that Yahello was qualified for their team, but their conversation was suddenly interrupted by another man, Operation Team 1 leader Steven. Steven expressed his opinion that Yahello should join Team 1 instead. Steven believed that he could mold Yahello into a fierce and ruthless operative, as Team 1 was considered the foundation of one. Team 1 consisted of founding contributors who had been part of the organization since the Garabong gambling days, and they believed that dealing with coins required a brutal nature. Steven also took the opportunity to mock Kim, suggesting that Team 2 was too soft in their operations. Chairman Jung intervened, putting an end to Steven's comments. He then turned to Team 3 for their opinion on Yeobium. Team 3 leader Lee Jamin had no particular opinion and was inclined to follow the chairman's decision. Chairman Jung revealed that he had an idea in mind. He wanted to transfer Yeobium to an operational team eventually, but before doing so, he intended to put Yeobium through a real test. This revelation left the 3 team leaders wondering about the nature of this test and what it would entail. Back at the luxury clothing store, Yeobium decided to buy his sister a handbag, paying for it in full with cash. Yu-sung was taken aback by this extravagant purchase, thinking her brother was acting irrationally. Yeobium explained that students nowadays tend to judge and bully those who come from less privileged backgrounds, and he wanted to make sure his sister wouldn't face such problems. However, Yo-sung was furious and demanded to know how Yeobium had acquired so much money. Yeobium tried to give her a false answer, claiming he worked in a famous company with overtime pay, but Yo-sung saw through his lie and threw a bag at him, tears in her eyes. She implored Yeobium to confess everything he had been through and return to the time when they could study together. Yeobium left his sister in silence, fully aware that getting too close to her could put Yu-sung in danger and involve her in the dark world he had entered. He couldn't help but feel regretful that they couldn't return to the way things used to be. Yeobium knew he had to focus on 2 things, either destroy one or be destroyed by them. Suddenly, a group of thugs appeared and approached Yu-sung, attempting to talk to her. Yeobium sensed that they were not good people and rushed to intervene, but he was abruptly stopped by another thug who brandished a knife and ordered Yeobium to follow him. Yeobium had no choice but to comply, and he followed the thugs to a construction site building. As they walked, Yeobium couldn't help but wonder about their true intentions for capturing him. It wasn't long before one of the thugs spoke up, explaining that they had apprehended Yeobium because he had disrupted their operation. With a stern tone, the thug demanded the money that Yeobium had earned from Crystal Coin. Chairman Jung revealed his intention, explaining that another cryptocurrency manipulation organization known as Mindu had suffered significant losses due to the Crystal Coin operation. He wanted to leak some information about Yeobium to provoke Mindu into taking action against him. This, Chairman Jung explained, was a test of Yeobium's capabilities to handle such situations. Whether Yeobium could emerge unscathed from this perilous situation would be entirely up to him. In the face of leader Kwon's menacing threats and Kyudong's aggressive actions, Yeobium held his ground with unwavering resolve. He remained unshaken, confidently asserting that attempting to harm him would be in vain, as all the money was firmly in the hands of Chairman Jung. Leader Kwon, growing increasingly frustrated by Yeobium's fearless demeanor, ordered Kyudong to proceed with his menacing plan, hoping to break Yeobium's resolve. However, even after an extended period of intense tension, Yeobium continued to display remarkable fearlessness, refusing to succumb to their intimidation tactics. Yeobium understood that the Mindu organization was unlikely to take direct action against one company, as doing so would essentially declare war. Instead, their objective appeared to be blackmailing Yeobium in order to extract information about one's internal affairs. Yeobium, demonstrating his deep knowledge of Mindu, pointed out that Mindu was desperate to gain an advantage over one, which is why they invested in Crystal Coin. He also revealed details about Mindu's criminal history, highlighting their past involvement in selling fake secondhand cars and swindling money from elderly individuals. Yeobium emphasized that the thugs from Mindu had never taken a life in the past decade. Yeobium, fully aware that Mindu's blackmail was nothing more than a bluff, decided to turn the tables. He boldly threatened them by claiming he would sell their lives. Mindu's agents were taken aback by his audacious words. Yeobium went on to emphasize that he was the mastermind behind the manipulation of Crystal Coin. He warned them that if one were to discover that they had lost a key figure responsible for manipulating the next coin, they would retaliate swiftly and decisively against Mindu. Yobium demanded that they pay him 100 million won to pretend that the events of that day never happened. Leader Kwon, growing increasingly agitated, retorted angrily. Yobium, seizing the opportunity, suddenly increased his demand to 200 million won. Leader Kwon, running out of patience, decided to take a knife and make Yobium's demise appear accidental. However, Yobium quickly identified Leader Kwon's weak fighting posture and skillfully maneuvered to bump him, causing him to fall. Yobium then seized the knife and pointed it at Leader Kwon's head, taking him hostage. He ordered the red-haired thug to press the button for the tower lift. The red-haired thug had no choice but to obey Yobium's command, allowing him to escape. Leader Kwon, frustrated by their failure to capture Yobium, realized that Yobium possessed extraordinary intelligence and had meticulously planned his escape, even utilizing the lowest-ranking member of their group to operate the tower lift. Leader Kwon immediately made a call to X and reported everything about the situation to him. Yobium, injured and bleeding from his escape, hurriedly sought medical attention. As he made his way, he suddenly heard a familiar voice calling his name. To his surprise, it was his former university colleague Jung Sumin, who had studied in the Department of Police Administration. Yobium remembered her as the girl who had invited him to the club meeting before the extra coin case. Relieved and exhausted, Yobium fell unconscious, and Jung Sumin, concerned for his well-being, decided to take him to her home. When Yobium woke up, he found himself in an unfamiliar place, with Sumin offering him a warm cup of tea. Jung Sumin couldn't help but express her surprise at how much Yobium had changed since they last met, and she was curious about why he had dropped out of university so suddenly. Yobium, without saying a word, abruptly left Sumin's house, leaving her behind. Sumin attempted to stop him, but her efforts were in vain. She couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness as she watched him go, holding on to his name card. Chairman Jung, with a smile, congratulated Yobium for passing the test. Yobium had finally achieved his goal of meeting Chairman Jung in person after 3 long years of plotting his revenge. Chairman Jung offered Yobium the opportunity to join any of the teams within the organization, but Yobium left the decision in Chairman Jung's hands. However, Chairman Jung had a different idea in mind. He suggested that Yobium should aim even higher, not just to join one of the existing teams, but to surpass them all. Chairman Jung revealed to Yobium that there had been a leak of information from their company, but only the instructions given to the team leaders had been compromised. He suspected that there was a spy among the 3 team leaders and requested Yobium to find and eliminate the spy. In exchange, Yobium would be offered a team leader position if he succeeded. Yobium agreed to Chairman Jung's offer, eager to prove himself. Meanwhile, in the police station, someone was conducting research on one company and discovered that Yobium was indeed working there. Soman, a lieutenant in the National Police Agency's intellectual crime team, couldn't shake her suspicion of Chairman Jung, despite the charges against him being cleared. Her co-worker advised her to drop the investigation and join them for lunch, but Sumin remained determined to uncover the truth. Yobium was taken by surprise by Chairman Jung's offer but was determined to find the spy at any cost. He met with Steven, an old member of one who had a background as a gangster. Yobium analyzed Steven and concluded that it was unlikely he was the spy, given his long history with the company. Steven brought Yobium outside and explained that their approach to manipulating cryptocurrency would be more akin to a gangster's way of doing things. They entered a private room in a pub, planning to meet their client. Yobium was puzzled by Steven's decision to engage in business in broad daylight, but Steven assured him they were here for a purpose. Their client, Baek-hoon, introduced himself as the vice chairman of Bitmain, a significant player in the cryptocurrency world. After some initial pleasantries, Steven brought up the topic of Amazing Coin and its potential commendation by Bitmain. Baek-hoon indicated it might be possible, but Yobium disliked their business model as it reminded him of his father's tragic past. Baek-hoon's irritation grew, and he threw an apple at Yobium's head. He then ordered Yobium to urinate in the room as part of the demeaning test, promising to grant their Amazing Coin a certificate of commendation if he complied. However, Their encounter was interrupted when a waiter entered the room to serve the food. Baek-hoon, in his frustration, made the excuse that he had not placed an order for the food. As the waiter confirmed that Baek-hoon had indeed placed the food order, Baek-hoon's frustration erupted further. He slapped the waiter and berated him, claiming that a mere waiter should not dare to talk back to him. Baek-hoon continued to bully the waiter, targeting him for his perceived poverty and weakness. Baek-hoon then turned his attention back to Yoo-beom, ordering him to lock the door so he could continue his assault on the defenseless waiter. However, Yoo-beom remained resolute in ignoring Baek-hoon's commands, further infuriating the cryptocurrency vice chairman. Baek-hoon's anger escalated to the point where he wanted to make Yoo-beom his punching bag. Yoo-beom, undeterred, sought Steven's permission to turn the tables and use Baek-hoon as his punching bag instead. The punching bag event commenced with Baek-hoon delivering the first blows. He landed punches on Yoo-beom's face, but Yoo-beom remained completely unfazed by the onslaught. Yoo-beom even humorously gave Baek-hoon's punches a pitiful score of just 5 points out of 100. Baek-hoon, growing increasingly furious, continued to rain punches upon Yoo-beom. However, Yoo-beom consistently rated each punch with a score below 5 points, showing his remarkable physical resilience and clever strategy. Steven, witnessing Yoo-beom's ability to endure the punishment and his smart approach, was deeply impressed and began to consider mentoring and developing Yoo-beom further. Baek-hoon, exhausted from delivering numerous punches to Yoo-beom, was now in a vulnerable state. Yoo-beom, taking advantage of the situation, made a straightforward request for Baek-hoon to list their coin. In response, Baek-hoon defiantly showed Yoo-beom his Minecraft finger, making it clear that he had no intention of listing their coin. Yoo-beom and Steven understood that conventional negotiations were futile with Baek-hoon. They decided to resort to more forceful methods to make him comply. Yoo-beom locked the door and unleashed a powerful punch that sent Baek-hoon flying across the room. Baek-hoon, now terrified, began pleading for mercy after just a single punch from Yoo-beom. However, Yoo-beom was determined to use his physical prowess to ensure Baek-hoon's cooperation and continued his relentless assault. Baek-hoon, in a last-ditch effort to resist, tried to provoke Yoo-beom and Steven by declaring that they had just declared war against him. He threatened to inform his father about their actions. However, Yoo-beom, undeterred and resolute in his mission, firmly grasped Baek-hoon's head and continued his relentless assault. Baek-hoon, now overwhelmed with fear and pain, begged for mercy and promised not to tell his father about the incident. Despite his pleas, Yoo-beom continued to deliver punishing blows. The next day, Baek-hoon returned home and reported the harrowing incident to his father, hoping for his support against one. He claimed that one had subjected him to this ordeal. However, Baek-hoon's father appeared disinterested and continued playing his mahjong game, ignoring his son's pleas for help. After finishing the mahjong match, Baek-hui, the CEO of the cryptocurrency market Bitmain and known as a white monster, took matters into his own hand. It was clear that he intended to seek revenge for the mistreatment of his son. In the headquarters of One, Kim was shocked by the audacious actions taken against the vice chairman of Bitmain. She couldn't believe the extent to which they had gone and expressed her concerns, believing their actions to be reckless. This led to a heated argument between Kim and Steven, with conflicting opinions about their recent actions. While this argument unfolded, Yoo-beom quietly contemplated the possibility of Kim being the spy. He carefully analyzed Kim's behavior and background, finding it increasingly likely that she might be the one leaking information. However, their discussion was interrupted by Team Leader 3, Lee Ji-min, who arrived and helped defuse the tension in the room. Yoo-beom's analysis of Ji-min revealed that he didn't have as much information about him as he did about others. When he initially researched One, this raised questions and suspicions about Ji-min's role in the organization. The lack of information and background about Lee Ji-min triggered Yoo-beom's suspicions, making him believe that Ji-min was the most likely candidate to be the spy within One. A sudden announcement blared from the speaker, summoning all the team leaders to gather in the restroom for an urgent matter. As they assembled in the chairman's room, they were informed of a pressing issue. The CEO of Bitmain was demanding the culprit responsible for assaulting the vice chairman be handed over. Chairman Jung expressed his concern and curiosity about who was responsible for the assault, and he shared alarming details about the CEO of Bitmain, known as Baekgui, or the White Monster. He emphasized that Baekgui had a history of competing with international mafias, signifying his formidable power. Moreover, Chairman Jung warned them that Baekgui was notorious for his brutal methods, even collecting torturous devices from the Middle Ages. The chilling prospect of survival, with odds of only 1 in 10, rejecting Baekgui's demands would likely lead to all-out war. In the face of the impending crisis, Yubiom initially considered confessing to the assault on the vice chairman. However, Stephen intervened and took responsibility for the act, urging Yubiom to remain inconspicuous since he was still relatively new to the organization. Yubiom couldn't help but wonder why Stephen was trying to appear strong and unyielding in this situation. Despite Stephen's willingness to face torture, Yubiom had an alternative plan in mind, which he proposed to the group. His suggestion came as a surprise to everyone present, as Yubiom had a bold plan to take down the White Monster. Yubiom had a well-thought-out plan, but he couldn't reveal all the details at that moment. He expressed his willingness to explain the plan as time went on, but for it to work, he needed permission from Chairman Jung. Yubiom made a direct request to Chairman Jung, proposing that he should lead the 3 team leaders in resolving the issue with the White Monster. Kim appeared to disagree with Yubiom's idea, likely because he was a newcomer in one company. However, Yubiom countered her by asking if she had a better plan. Chairman Jung ultimately agreed to Yubiom's request to lead the 3 team leaders. However, he also warned Yubiom that if he failed to destroy the White Monster, the consequences would be leading to his death. Yubiom's first order to the 3 team leaders was to inspect their computers. Initially, the leaders were taken aback by this request and attempted to deny it. However, Yubiom questioned whether they were hiding anything suspicious on their computers. Eventually, all 3 leaders agreed to comply with his request. Chairman Jung was impressed by Yubiom's determination to not only take on White Monster, but also to uncover the spy among them. He recognized Yubiom's willingness to go to great lengths to achieve their goals. Chairman Jung wanted to see just how far Yubiom could go in executing his plan. Later, outside the headquarters, Stephen and Yubiom shared a moment while having a smoke. Stephen expressed his gratitude to Yubiom for taking on the responsibility, but Yubiom corrected him, stating that he wasn't trying to save Stephen specifically. Despite Yubiom's attempts to deny it, Stephen felt genuinely touched by Yubiom's actions and decided to call him his brother from that moment on. Yubiom continued to spend time with Stephen, joining in on his activities such as watching movies, having drinks, and playing video games together. At 9 o'clock, Stephen bid farewell to Yubiom and headed home. Yubiom realized that there was no evidence to suggest that Stephen might be the spy. Suddenly, Stephen happily greeted a kid named Young Min, referring to himself as the child's dad. This revelation surprised Yubiom because when he had researched Stephen previously, he had found no information about Stephen being married or having a family. Yubiom couldn't help but feel a sense of disgust, thinking that Stephen was destroying other families while leading a happy life with his own. Despite the strange revelation, Stephen invited Yubiom to come to his house and share dinner together. Stephen prepared a homemade meal, which he mentioned was Yang Min's favorite food. However, Yang Min rejected the meal and retreated to his room. Yubiom was puzzled and asked Stephen about the whereabouts of his wife, as he had just witnessed Stephen interact with a child who referred to him as Dad. Stephen, however, seemed confused by the question and clarified that he was still unmarried. Yubiom couldn't help but wonder about the identity of the child. Stephen revealed that the child he had interacted with was the son of his deceased colleague. Stephen then delved into the grim details of the past, explaining that he and his colleague had been close and trusted colleagues within one from the very beginning. However, their alliance had taken a sinister turn when they discovered that this colleague was, in fact, an undercover police officer. In a chilling and disturbing confession, Stephen admitted to having killed his colleague. What made the revelation even more haunting was the fact that the colleague's young son had been a helpless witness to this horrifying act of violence. Yubiom was taken aback by Stephen's story and it left him with a lingering sense of unease. Despite the enjoyable time they had spent together earlier, Yu couldn't ignore the dark realities of their shared lifestyle. It was becoming increasingly clear that Stephen was far from a good person. As Yu prepared to leave, Stephen persisted in inviting him to stay overnight. However, Yu declined, emphasizing the need for a good night's rest before their confrontation with White Monster. Stephen was eager to learn more about the plan, but Yu remained steadfast in his decision to reveal it as late as possible. He was acutely aware of the risks of information leakage and was determined to keep their strategy closely guarded. The next day, at White Monster's residence, the White Monster's bodyguard informed the president that Yu was on his way. White Monster gave permission for Yu to enter. As Yu entered the house, he greeted White Monster with a professional demeanor. White Monster was impressed by Yu initial display of bravery, recognizing that Yu was prepared to face the consequences that awaited him. The vice president insisted to his father, White Monster, that Yu should be killed. However, White Monster explained to his son that it was illegal to kill a human being. Instead, White Monster ordered his men to bring out a special torturing device, an Iron Maiden of SS class. White Monster then instructed Yu to enter the Iron Maiden. Initially, Yu did not respond, and White Monster believed that Yu's ego had taken control of his body. Intrigued by the prospect of destroying such a person, White Monster drew his katana in preparation to attack. However, Yu suddenly spoke up and proposed a deal, which left the vice president and the others confused. Yu reached for a tablet, presumably to show them a report as part of his proposal. Yu stated that the stablecoin released by Bitmain, particularly the main coin, had reported reserve asset status. However, according to his research, the coin appeared to be a scam with an unbearably high price. A few hours earlier, in the headquarters, Stephen inquired about Yu plan, and Yu revealed that his objective was to dismantle Bitmain rather than confront White Monster directly. Kim expressed doubt about the feasibility of destroying Bitmain and its cryptocurrency exchanges. Yu clarified that Bitmain wasn't just a regular cryptocurrency exchange. It was actually a front for foreign criminal groups involved in money laundering. They had introduced the main coin to help with their illegal activities. Main coin price doesn't fluctuate much, so it looks like it's a great laundering machine. But if look into it deeper, the reserved asset is a mess. The guarantee system is also a mess. It's just trash itself, but White Monster has acted as if it's a stable coin, scamming them. And the reason why this was all possible is because the foreign gangs have trust in the White Monster name itself. Bitmain has been using the main coin as collateral to gain more leverage to grow itself. And if these foreigners get to know the truth, many guests will leave. Destroying Bitmain, that's White Monster's weak point. Back in the present, after hearing Yubiom's information, White Monster wasn't intimidated and insisted that Yubiom should report to his VIP guests. White Monster knew that Yu didn't have access to the VIP contact information. White Monster then revealed that the contact information of his VIP guests was heavily encrypted, making it impossible for Yu to send any information to them. He raised his katana, ready to strike Yu surprised him by displaying another page on his tablet, revealing the contact information of all 32 VIP guests from different countries and gangs. This unexpected revelation caused White Monster to halt his attack. Yu then revealed to White Monster that he had already made reservations for them to report the information about Bitmain to the VIP guests. White Monster was clearly taken aback by this revelation and wondered how Yu had obtained the contact information. Yu confessed that he had acquired it from the vice president, explaining that he had gained access to the vice president's computer before. Stephen and Kim were in the lorry parked outside of White Monster's house, closely observing Yubiom's actions. Kim couldn't help but express her curiosity about what Yu had actually meant by his plan. Stephen decided to shed some light on the situation by recounting the events when he and Yu had encountered the vice president, Baek-hoon, at the pub. After Yu had beaten Baek-hoon to the point of unconsciousness, he had seized the opportunity to access Baek-hoon's computer, ultimately obtaining the contact information of the international gangs. Kim expressed relief that their mission had been successful in acquiring this crucial information. Steven disclosed that, in reality, they had not been able to find any useful information on Baekhoon's computer, and the contact information Yubium had presented to White Monster was entirely fabricated. However, the astonishing part was that no one suspected the contact information to be fake due to Yubium's remarkable charisma and presence. Both Kim and Steven were deeply impressed by Yubium's strategic planning, especially considering he was just a newcomer. Essentially, Yubium was skillfully scamming the scammers themselves. White Monster threw his katana to the ground, expressing his disappointment in his son. He then turned to Yubium and asked what he wanted. White Monster was willing to forgive Yubium for what he had done to his son, but Yubium had another request. He demanded that 3 of their coins be listed on Bitmain. Steven and Kim were taken aback by Yubium's unexpected request, as it had not been part of the plan they were aware of. White Monster initially agreed to Yubium's demand to list 3 of their coins on Bitmain. He even began preparing the contract and was about to stamp it to seal the deal. However, at the last moment, White Monster halted the stamping process, expressing doubts. White Monster revealed that he had received an anonymous message stating that Yubium's contact list information was fake, which left Yubium and the others in a state of confusion and uncertainty. Yubium quickly grasped the situation and realized that the spy had sent the message to White Monster in an attempt to disrupt their negotiations. White Monster taunted Yubium, suggesting that perhaps they needed to double-check the authenticity of the contact list information. Yubium swiftly took out his phone and played a recorded voice of their previous conversation, exposing the true extent of Bitmain's dark money laundering activities. With this evidence in hand, Yubium threatened White Monster, warning him that he would share this information with the VIP guests. The vice chairman, infuriated by Yubium's recorded audio, lashed out at him, accusing him of being a scam artist. On the other hand, White Monster remained surprisingly composed, believing that Yubium had inadvertently confessed that the contact information was indeed fake. In his mind, the solution to their problem seemed simple: eliminate Yubium and seize the recording to erase any trace of their wrongdoing. Yubium corrected their misunderstanding, asserting that the contact information was indeed real, and he had scheduled it to be sent within an hour. White Monster was taken aback by this revelation, realizing that Yubium was not bluffing. On the other hand, Steven and Kim were left perplexed because Yubium had previously declared the information to be fake. White Monster laughed menacingly, sending shivers down Yubium's spine. Yubium couldn't help but wonder if White Monster had completely lost his mind. White Monster then ordered all of his men to surround Yubium, boldly declaring that he didn't care because he was confident that he could eliminate Yubium within the next hour. Suddenly, a man swung a pipe toward Yubium, but Yubium skillfully evaded the attack and swiftly knocked the man down. Steven, observing the situation from a distance, asked Yubium if he needed any reinforcements. However, Yubium declined the offer, emphasizing that he could handle the situation on his own. He was determined not to call for reinforcements, as doing so would effectively declare war against White Monster. Steven is worried about Yubium's life, but Yubium just ignored his worrying and tell him to execute the plan B. Steven followed his order immediately. Yubium stood his ground amidst the gangsters who had surrounded him. With unwavering composure, he closed his eyes. Suddenly, the lights in the room went out, plunging the area into darkness. When the gangsters lit up their lighters to find Yubium, they were astonished to discover that he had vanished without a trace. Not only had Yubium disappeared, but he had also managed to snatch the contract and the stamp from right under their noses. Fueled by anger and desperation, White Monster ordered his henchmen to ensure that the contract did not escape from the house at any cost. As Yubium hid behind the wall, a stroke of misfortune occurred when one of the gangsters spotted him and swung a pipe in his direction. Thankfully, Yubium managed to evade the blow, narrowly escaping harm. However, the noise from this encounter drew the attention of other gangsters who began converging on the scene. Surrounded by 6 gangsters, Yubium's confidence and combat skills allowed him to hold his own for a brief moment. He kicked multiple gangsters away, expertly dodged a dagger strike, and even landed an uppercut on one of his assailants. However, in the midst of the chaos, Yobiom received a sudden and powerful punch to his stomach, momentarily stunning him and leaving him vulnerable to further attacks. As Yobiom was momentarily down and the other gangsters celebrated their apparent victory, a massive individual with rainbow-colored hair emerged on the scene. This imposing figure was known as Little Giant. A towering figure standing at a staggering height of 210 cm appeared before him. Little Giant was classified as a danger level, a class foreign mercenary working for White Monster. Yobiom realized that dealing with this formidable opponent would be no easy task. As Yobiom and Little Giant engaged in a fierce battle, just as Little Giant was about to land a devastating punch, a sudden punch from an unexpected source threw Little Giant off balance. Both the gangsters and Yobiom were surprised to see Steven arrive on the scene, coming to Yobiom's rescue. Despite Yobiom's anger and concern about potentially starting a war, Steven reassured him that he had come alone and declared Yobiom as his brother, emphasizing that he couldn't abandon him in his time of need. Steven instructed Yobiom to stay close and ensure the contract remained in his possession as they made their escape. Little Giant leaped toward Steven, preparing to attack him. However, Steven, classified as SSS danger level in one company, effortlessly incapacitated the giant. Surrounded by numerous gangsters, Steven and Yobiom fought valiantly, managing to overpower their adversaries and make a successful escape from the area. Later on, Bitmain and One have officially resumed negotiations. Using the audio recording and the information, One started to put pressure on Bitmain. White Monster ultimately surrendered, and that's how 1-3 coins is published in Bitmain and One before the publishment of the coins, alluring the apes to purchase the coins, then selling all of them as soon as they're published and gaining immense capital gain. And also, that day, the pain and suffering of the apes also occurred. Yobiom's conscience seems to be weighing on him as he realizes the impact of his actions on innocent investors. The next day, Yobiom entered the same lorry that the leader had used the day before. Yobiom had anticipated the spy's interference in his plan. As a precaution, he had informed Steven, whom he believed to be the least likely to be a spy, that he had lied about the contact information being fake. However, Yobiom still allowed the spy to interrupt his plan by pretending that his contact information was indeed fake. Yobiom examined the CCTV footage inside the lorry, determined to identify the real spy among the team leaders. He reviewed the recording and noticed that between 21:20 and 21:22, one of the team leaders made a subtle gesture as if they were texting someone. However, to his surprise, Yobiom couldn't find anyone texting in the recording. He was puzzled, wondering who the real spy was that had sent the message to White Monster. Yobiom began to suspect Steven because he had only shared the information with Steven. After some calm reflection, Yobiom began to think that Steven might not be clever enough to set a perfectly timed message to send to White Monster. Doubts about Steven being the spy started to fade as Yobiom considered this possibility. Yobiom began to suspect that the spy might be from a third party, someone who had hacked into the lorry's CCTV system to gather information. X, sitting in his computer room, chuckled to himself, knowing that Yobiom had finally realized his presence as the hacker who had infiltrated the CTV system. However, Yobiom still had not found the real spy. He wondered if it could be another member from one company, someone from the police, or perhaps a member of another special force. Despite his efforts, Yobiom had not yet identified the spy. Nevertheless, his determination to uncover the traitor remained steadfast, and he was resolved to find the spy soon. At the police station, Jung So-man was conducting an investigation into the publication of 3 of One's coins on Bitmain. She noticed that these 3 coins had started to experience a bearish market, and suspicions began to arise in her mind. So-man suspected that Chairman Jung might be involved in some kind of scheme once again, and she also had her doubts about Yobiom's potential involvement in the situation. So-man's co-worker discovered that she was still actively actively investigating one company and was curious about how Summon knew about Yubiom's involvement. Summon decided to confide in her co-worker, revealing that Yubiom was actually her university colleague. The co-worker suddenly had some interest to investigate about one company and decided to join Jung Summon to investigate on it. Summon was a bit surprised that her co-worker decided to help her, which last time he mentioned that don't bother to dig into one company and that Chairman Jung is clear and is innocent. Summon's co-worker confessed that he had long suspected Chairman Jung's involvement in manipulating cryptocurrency coins and gangsters. However, he felt powerless to pursue the case alone, as most police members had given up investigating one company after Chairman Jung was declared clear of charges. Realizing that Summon could be the key to finding evidence against Chairman Jung, he asked her to join forces and investigate together. A few months later, Yo-sung discovered that Yo-biom was working in the office building of One. She had become suspicious after noticing her brother's extravagant clothing purchases and decided to investigate his company's location. However, as she was inquiring around the building, a thug approached her, questioning her presence and intentions. Terrified, Yoo-sung asked the thug if her brother worked in this company and explained that she was his sister. The thug responded that they didn't have any knowledge of him and demanded to know how she had obtained this information, further pressuring her for answers. Fortunately, Steven arrived just in time to intervene and stop the thugs from harassing Yoo-sung. He then took her to a luxury restaurant where he explained that he and Yoo-biom were like brothers, and that he was happy to meet Yoo-biom's sister. Yoo-sung was curious about their relationship and didn't fully understand what Steven meant by calling Yoo-biom his brother. Despite her initial fear, Yoo-sung started to believe that Steven might not be a bad person. However, her opinion quickly changed when Steven received a phone call and scolded his men for failing to carry out a certain task. This made Yoo-sung suspicious of Steven's true intentions and character. Steven apologized to Yoo-sung for scaring her and encouraged her to enjoy the meal. As they were dining, Yoo-biom entered the restaurant. Steven greeted him warmly, but Yoo-biom was visibly upset and criticized Steven for capturing his sister. Yoo-sung intervened, trying to calm her brother down and explaining that Steven had actually saved her. After Yoo-biom calmed down, he apologized and joined them at the table. Yoo-sung, still curious about the relationship between Yoo-biom and Steven, asked whether Yoo-biom really worked at the webtoon company, as Yoo-biom had told her before. Steven assured Yoo-sung that they genuinely worked at a webtoon company and that the call earlier was just related to a story for a webtoon. However, Yoo-sung remained unconvinced by Steven's words and still harbored suspicions that they were involved in illegal activities. Steven tried to persuade Yoo-sung to trust them, and Yoo-biom scolded his sister for being rude to his senior colleague. Despite her doubts, Yoo-sung chose to put her faith in her brother, believing that he was a nice and smart person with a valid reason for the job he was doing. She expressed her support for him and left the restaurant feeling glad that Yoo-biom had such lovely colleagues. After their conversation, Steven and Yoo-biom stepped outside for a smoke. Steven asked Yoo-biom why he chose to work in such a risky and illegal career, questioning Yoo-biom's reasons for risking his life in this line of work. Steven shared that he continued in this career because he was born without a family, and for him, there was no turning back. He hoped to have a good family in the future and expressed his desire for Yoo-biom to treat his sister well. After their smoke break, Steven left. However, Yoo-biom received a message on his phone, and to his surprise, it was from Chairman Jung. The message inquired whether Yoo-biom had found the spy yet. Yoo-biom replied that he was still searching. Chairman Jung's response was shocking. He told Yoo-biom to stop searching for the spy because Chairman Jung had already found them. Chairman Jung revealed that the spy was Steven and ordered Yoo-biom to kill him.